Well, I came to New Zealand in 1979. Spent a year in Kerikeri with my dad in his cottage and his property in Kerikeri. And I had been travelling on a sailboat for 5 years and having adventures. Got shipwrecked in Africa, sailed to America, sailed South America, the Caribbean, Florida, and then we needed to build a new boat, a much bigger boat. And then the relationship ended and drastically. I ran away from my life, grabbed my children, or one of them, and ended up in home for battered wives. And eventually I got out of America. I was an illegal alien, so it wasn't terribly easy getting out of America. But it happened, and I flew back to London with my 2 children because I was able to rescue my eldest. Bianca was 17 months and Eric was nearly 3. And so I spent a year in West Wales with my uncle after leaving America. And it took me that long, it took me about a year to apply for permission to emigrate to New Zealand. And I was refused. That was quite amazing. At the interview at New Zealand House in London, just longing to be able to join my family who had immigrated here. The rest of my family, my dad, my 2 brothers and sister. And the interviewer was looking very disappointed, and he started to shut the file on me and said, "Well, I'm sorry, Miss Evans. I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do to help you." And I suddenly said, "Oh, but I'm going to write a book." And it was like I shot him. I don't know. He just went doing. And he just stared at me for a moment, and then he sort of went into himself, and then the next thing he said was, "Well, I think I just got this memory that there's some clause where the last member of the last family member is able to join the family in New Zealand. So, yeah, I will look into it," he said. And then he said, "Thank you, Miss Evans. Good day to you." And as he leading me out the door, he said, "Well, all the best with your book." So I was allowed to come to New Zealand. In my heart, I realised that I got permission to come here just because I said I was going to write a book. So I've written a few. So there we are. And so I arrived in New Zealand around about May 79, so it's a pretty long time ago now. And lived with Dad in Kerikeri in a little cottage. And then I just couldn't settle down. I had no sense of belonging. I didn't feel I even belonged on this planet. I just had absolutely no sense of belonging. And I just wanted to cover that up by, if I keep on being adventurous and travelling, maybe I can forget the sense of not belonging anywhere. So I asked Dad, no, I didn't ask him, he just happened to mention he had a friend, Andrea Goodwin, who lived on Great Barrier Island, and I suddenly thought, wow, that's where I want to go. I want to go to Great Barrier Island. I want to live on an island. That sounded adventurous enough to fill up the gaps in me, so I went to the island, met Andrea, and contracted to lease her house for as long as I wanted it for $17 a week. It was a concrete block house on the right underneath the highest point of the hill at Blind Bay, or Kupu Bay on Great Barrier Island. And I packed up all my worldly possessions, fitted into 2 trunks. So I had 2 children. Bianca would have been 3 and 4. Bianca 3, Eric about 4. Packed it up and put my car on the ferry and came to Great Barrier Island and lived in that breeze block house, which had been condemned by the council because the windows hadn't fitted to the walls and there was these gaps And there was no electricity, no running water, no nothing. It was totally basic. I had a stove there, a fireplace, so I could keep warm and I could cook on it. So that was something. And I had candles until I got tired of them being blown out, because the draft through the window frame in the wall, and they blow the candles out. So I now got a Tilly lamp. That's a pressurized kerosene lamp, and that wouldn't go out, so I had that. I don't know.
You're getting a bit lost. You're getting into the lost in the details.
Lost in the details.
So you're trying to get to the point where your life transformed. You're transformed.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, living in Okupu, and there wasn't much to do. I was solo mum with 2 little children, and what do you do all day? The house had nothing in it, had no furniture. We had mattresses on the floor and the kitchen. There was nothing else. And so I did fill up my time by keeping busy. So I decided I needed a chook house to keep chickens. So I cut down some trees at the back of the section and dug holes in the bank and built a house on this bank about that angle. So I put in these 4 trees and got some wood and made a floor, got some wire netting, made walls. A friend put some tin on to make a roof. I got a plank and put sticks on it and made a run for the chickens. But I didn't know anything about chickens, so it became the children's playhouse, and they were my chickens. And so I kind of ran out of things to do. I had to dig a lot of long drops. We had no toilet, obviously we had nothing. We had to wash the clothes in the stream at the bottom of the section, the garden. And that was our bath, and it was freezing cold. But it was lovely. It was so beautiful. And I ran out of things to do, so I started going out. I would go to Okupu, I think they call it, not Okupu, sorry, Claris Club. Drinking, and so my life became one of a wild woman, drinking and men and sex and goodness knows what else, and a string of guys. And I was totally deteriorated, morally completely deteriorated, and I knew it. And so what happened? And then one night, after this guy left in the middle of the night, and I just wrapped a sheet around me and stood by the window, and I looked up at the stars, and my whole being, I didn't know anything about prayer, okay? I didn't know anything about God, but I was so desperate, my whole being just prayed. And I said, if there's anything up there, I need love. I want love. I don't know, this isn't love. The men, my naked body in a sheet, this isn't love. This isn't what I want. And that I knew that those thoughts were floating up and they were heard. I knew that I had been heard. It was amazing. And that was the beginning, I suppose. And what happened then? Then depression set in, super depression. And I think that was the gift of God, that I'd come to the end. And that when we reached bedrock, and we realised we've lost it, we've lost the plot, we've become totally immoral, and then just darkness came and depression. And I thought, well, the only answer is to go to be with God. And how do you do that? Well, you have to die. So that's the state I was in. So I packed up the car, put the children in the car, and decided I'd go to my lovely other single mother friend, Cherie O'Toole, who had children the same age as Eric and Bianca, Jody and James. And so terrible, but I just thought, oh well, I'll leave Bianca and Eric with Cherie, and they can grow up with her children, and she'll look after them. And I'll go and drown myself in the middle of the night off the beach where she lives. So that gave me some kind of motivation to do something. So I got in the car, drove towards her house, and as I got to the top of Medlands Beach Hill, the hill at the top of the hill before you go down into Midlands Beach, and at the very top of the hill, Jesus came to me. I saw him. He was a few meters in front of the car. I'm driving the car, approaching the brow of the hill, and he stood in front of the car, about a meter above the ground, and huge. And he put his arms out towards me like that, and he said, "Come." And as he put his arms out and said, "Come," I just broke down. From deep down in my here, just sobs came out of me, just sobbing, because that was it. I wanted him more than anything. And so I cried all the way down, and because I was crying so much, the tears blinded my eyes, and I could no longer see him. And suddenly there I am at Cherie's house, and so I got out of the car and went to Cherie, and I couldn't speak really, and so she just looked at me and said, "Well, you need a cup of tea." She was immensely pragmatic and practical. She's a wonderful friend, and he said, "Come on, go into the lounge, lie down on the couch, and I'm going to make you a cup of tea." And she did that, and I'm lying down on the couch in the lounge, and Jodie, that's her little girl, Jodie, beautiful blonde little girl. She just looked at me for a moment, and then she ran away into her mother's bedroom, and she came back a minute later with a box, and I realised, oh, she's got her mother's jewellery box. And she sat down on the floor beside me. I'm on the couch, and right down beside me, and she got the box and opened it up and tipped all the things out, and it was all, lovely cheap costume jewellery. But she wasn't interested in that. She was interested in something in the corner. She eventually picked it out, got my hand, opened my hand up, put this little thing in my hand, and closed my hand over it, and I went back like that. And then I opened it up, and there in the centre of my hand was this tiny golden cross. And as I looked at the cross, a beam of light went from the cross up, and I looked up, and there's no longer any ceiling there. It was just this beam of light, and the beam of light went through all of eternity. And I realised that little sign, that little cross, was the pivot upon which all turned. The pivot upon which all turns. And that was the revelation given to me, that it was the most precious gift, or it was the most precious thing in the entire universe was the cross. I had no idea of the gospel, no idea at all. I just had that revelation, and I closed my hand over that cross, and so that's the end of that sort of incident. I don't remember what happened next, except I was allowed to keep, I'm sure he must have let me keep that little cross. So what happened next? Good job I wrote it all down, because I lose sequence. The sequence of these things that happened. But when I wrote my autobiography in 2001 at the farm, it all came back to me in the right, correct sequence, and I'm so glad I wrote it. So although I can't get the sequence right off the top of my head, it's all written down. So that's really, because lots of wonderful things happened.
So that was your...
I carried on with my plan. Like, okay, I must have had that cross and kept it. I must have put it somewhere safe. And in the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up and looked up, and there was a full moon. and I knew I had to carry out my plan. So it was freezing cold. It was in end of March, and a cold wind. So I grabbed somebody's jacket off a hook. I don't know who it was. We grabbed it, put it round me, and just walked through the sand dunes. Cherie's house was right in the sand dunes on the edge of Medlands Beach. So I walked through the sand dunes onto the beach. I walked along the beach, and then all my deep depression and desperation just suddenly evaporated. So I got into the sea, and I thought, well, what am I doing here? It's very cold. I'm meant to be drowning myself. But I thought, oh, well, it's cold. So I just walked out of the sea, and I felt quite peaceful. And I walked up to the top of the beach, and I walked under the shelter of the sand dunes, and I just walked all the way along the beach. And then suddenly this thought came to me, and it was like, there needs to be a crisis. It was like those words came to me, there needs to be a crisis. And I remember thinking, that's strange. Why would I think there needs to be a crisis? I understand now why. Because you need that to cast yourself on the Lord to find him. And so anyway, what happened next though? I just suddenly, after saying, I know there needs to be a crisis, something has to happen, then I knew if I would kneel down on the beach, right there and then, kneel down and put my hands in the air, something would happen. I didn't know what, but I tell you, I was so shy, so self-centered, so self-conscious, I couldn't even do that. Here's the middle of the night, and the beach was nobody from another mile. I was too shy to do that, and I many times I thought, why? Anyway, I didn't. I was too shy or something. And so I kept walking, and I came to the end of the beach, and there was a little path going up to a house right at the end of the beach. So I walked up there, and I tried to get into the house. It was a summer house. There was nobody there. I couldn't get in. If I could have got through a window, I would have climbed in and gone to bed. But I couldn't. So I went to the back doorstep out of the wind, and there was an old potato sack there. I don't know if it's a potato sack, but it was a Hessian sack. So I climbed into that on the concrete doorstep, and there were two sticks there. And one stick was a bit shorter than the other. And without thinking, I just, lay down in the sack and put those sticks like that. One that way and one that way. The cross, whatever the cross was, I didn't understand, except I'd been told now that it was the most precious thing in the whole universe, and it would turn everything. It was a pivot upon which all would turn. So anyway, I just fell asleep just like that. And then suddenly I woke up and looked up, and there was the Southern Cross, the star formation, the Southern Cross. And so I just felt so drawn to it. So I just got up and walked up the hill through the gorse bushes and got to the top of the hill, and I spent the rest of the night really just staring at the Southern Cross and not praying in words, but yearning. There wasn't any words, just yearning. Then I got cold, so I went back down to the doorstep, and I cuddled up in my potato sack. And then the next thing is the sun is high in the sky, and there's a man on a horse with a little child in the saddle in front of him on a horse right beside me, yelling at me, saying, "Get up, go home, get up, they're looking for you, get up." So, and then he just turned his horse around quite strongly. He must have been quite angry, and took off. And so I jumped up and I ran all the way back down the beach. And when I got to the little track through the sand dunes to Cherie's house, Cherie was right there. And of course she was crying her eyes out, because she thought, oh no, another friend is going to die, She'd already had a friend who had drowned herself there. And the poor girl, I terrified her. So she gave me a big hug and a cuddle, took me back, and then she gave me a famous cup of tea again, which is this wonderful brew. She kept a big teapot with this funny tea cozy, and she believed in teapots and tea. she was just so comforting. I'm so grateful for her. And so unemotional. Okay, what are we going to do now with you? And she said, while we're drinking a cup of tea, something has to happen to you, Judith. Something you've got to shape up or ship out or something. And she said, and then she almost like had a light bulb. And she said, I know, there's this place, this commune up north. I think it's supposed to be Christian, whatever that is. But, well, she was Catholic, so she did know a little bit. And she said, this commune, that's where you need to go. Okay, we'll ring up. So she rang them up, and it was the day before, well, 2 days before Good Friday. And so this, it was a Christian community. And they said, sorry, we're fully booked. We've got no room. There's no room for... So Cherie said, oh, all right. And that was the first phone call. Then she rang them up a few hours later, and they said the same thing. Sorry, there's no room. And then she said, well, I've got to go shopping. You know, I can't just hang around here. I've got to do my shopping. So we got in the car, and we went to Trifina. And she bought me an ice cream. And then she went in the telephone box, and she tried the third time. She rang up the same place, and she was sort of more desperate this time. She said, listen, you've got to help this girl. She needs some help. And they said, oh, okay, we'll send a counsellor down to talk to her then tomorrow. And so Cherie came out of the phone box and told me that they're going to send a counsellor down to talk to you. And I thought, what's a counsellor? What's council worker? They dig holes in the road, you know. They what do I need a council worker for? Why do I need a road digger? I had no idea about counselling. I never heard of such a thing. And so I said to her, Cherie, I don't want that. And so she said, oh, okay. And we went back to her house, and I stayed the night. No, I didn't stay the night, sorry. I was just too desperate, and I said, look, if this is Christian, then these people, from my mind saying, I went home, put the children to bed, and then sat on my kind of the bed, and I slept in the kitchen opposite the wood stove, big wood stove. There was a bench. I slept on the bench sort of thing. And there was a table there littered with all my papers and things. I was always writing, so it was mountains of papers and pens and pencils. Anyway, I just sat there, and I'd done everything that I knew what to do. And then the darkness and desolation came down on me again, or came up out of me. And I was just overwhelmed with it. And then suddenly, and I felt like I've just been washed up on the rocks of, rocks of desolation, dregs of humanity. That's how I felt like I was, just scum. And then I didn't know how I would cope with these waves of desolation and darkness. And then, I don't know, it just faded. They faded away. And then I saw, well, you'd call it a vision. I saw, but it was real. I just saw a city, a four-walled city. I now know that it was the celestial city, the city of God, which is in heaven. But I saw that, and it was immense and very, very high walls and square, and emanating from inside of it was this amazing light and love and truth and acceptance and love. And then it came down, the city just came down in front of me, and then there's all I could see then, because I was focused on the immensity of the wall in front of me, and there was a door, a double door, an archway double door, and the double doors opened out just slowly, and as the double doors opened out, they turned into arms, and I realized they were the arms of Jesus, which I had seen when he had said, come. And and alternately there were doors leading into the city, and inside there was this amazing light and love, a purity. And I saw myself walking towards those open doors, those open arms. All that I wanted, I just wanted to enter into that purity and that love and that light, blinding light. And so I saw myself with my one child in either hand, just walking towards the door, and the overwhelmed feeling of unworthiness, like, who am I, I felt, totally without condemnation, but the absolute truth that I was unclean, a rotten sinner, and I had no intellectual understanding about what I'm saying. It was just the emotional, the feeling of, I can't go in there. And but peace came because I wanted to. I longed with my whole heart to enter, and the vision faded, probably because of my tears, because I was sobbing again. And so it faded, but it left an immense peace, and I just lay down on my bed and I just went straight to sleep. I slept for a long time. When I woke up, I looked after the children, and then I suddenly thought about what Cherie had said, that why I couldn't go to this community or commune. I was using the word commune. I didn't know anything. I didn't know the difference. And she said something about there was no room because it was Easter. Okay, and then from my childhood training, I probably would have gone in the Anglican church to church maybe twice a year. We probably went near Easter or near Christmas or something. So I had this understanding that Easter was something to do with Jesus, and maybe it had something to do with that tiny little cross. And so I sat down on the edge of my bed at this dining table full of paper, and I wrote a note to Kevin, and he was the last guy. Oh my goodness, I've forgotten the most important bit of the whole story about Kevin. Oh, well, I'll continue this bit, and then I'll have to backtrack and tell you why he was important. Okay, so I wrote a note to Kevin. I said, look, I'm going to find out what this Easter thing is. I don't know, but I think it's a lead, I think it's something. And folded it up, and I thought I'd give him one of the children's Easter eggs, and I would drop it off on my way up to Port Fitzroy and then Karaka Bay, because I knew this commune place was in Karaka Bay. So I had made my resolve. I packed my bag, I got in my car, and I was going to this place whether they wanted me or not, whether they had any room or not. I was just going to go and land myself on them. Okay, so I'm in my car, I'm travelling north, and I could tell you the rest of that story, but can I backtrack? Yeah. Okay. Another incident is where I don't know the sequence, but I can remember I was in the club at Claris, and there's a lot of noise, a lot of cigarette smoke, a lot of probably weed smoke as well. It was in those days it's very much an alternative culture, and I was very much involved in alternative culture. I was a hippie, and so I was at the club and drinking and whatever. I didn't smoke, I didn't have dope, I didn't like that sort of stuff. And I got to the back of the club, and this is the worst part of my immorality. There was a circle of men, and they were discussing which one it would be that night, and amongst this group there were a little circle, and I suddenly clicked to me, what on earth's going on? This is the pits. I have reached the pits. These men wanted me, and they were sort of vying, and suddenly I was overwhelmed with disgust, absolutely disgust to myself. And so I just turned around and I walked out of the door of the club. I walked down the path to the car park, and in front of me was the truck of one of these guys. He was called Dave. And I just opened the cab door, the driver's door, and I just got in there and I just sat in the cab of this car, this truck, sorry. And then I just, again, overwhelmed with disgust and despair, and but then this intense longing came through, and then I saw a picture, a vision again. I didn't know anything about the words vision or anything, but I just saw a low hill, and I saw two roads, and there was a narrow winding path going up the hill and a wide road, and there where I was. And I now know in hindsight what this picture is. I was on the broad road to hell, and I was going on the completely opposite direction to the winding, difficult path that was going up the hill, and I was with thousands of people, and we were all walking on this wide way, laughing and carrying on, and I suddenly knew that's the wrong way, just like that, that's the wrong way. And then my whole heart, I don't know how to go on that other road behind me. It doesn't look terribly comfortable, and but I just so wanted to go not that way, not the broad way down there with them. And then the whole vision just dissipated, because the door was suddenly opened, and there was Dave looking at me, wondering what I'm doing and sitting in his car, or probably glad I was, because maybe he'd won me or something, I don't know. And I just looked at him and I said, I'm dead. I'm dead. I know I'm sitting here breathing, but I'm dead. And he just looked at me with great compassion, but he couldn't speak. He thought I'd lost my marbles, I'd gone insane. And I couldn't say any more than that, I'm dead. And I just brushed past him. I got out of the cab, and then I climbed into the back of the truck. It was a big open truck, big open tray of the truck, and it was filled with a lot of people from all young hippies, all like me, and got in there and travelled to wherever the truck was going. And it was to one of the houses where the community of these people lived, and I felt a real identity with them. And I've written a bit about that. And then we got to the house, and it was full of people, and there was beer bottles everywhere, there was candles dripping, because remember there's no electricity, it's just real basic. And then I made my way to a dining table in the middle of the house, and there's people everywhere and noise. And I just sat down at this table that obviously needed clearing. I don't know when the last meal had been cleared away, and I'm just sitting there, and I just started staring at the young man opposite me. And I remembered seeing him a few days ago, and I'd seen him across the garden of this place. And when I looked at him and he looked at me, our eyes, it was quite a long distance, they clicked. And I knew something was different about him. And not long after that, I was in the bedroom with him. And I was in the bedroom with him, in bed with him. But I didn't remove all my clothes, because now I had some insight. And so I just lay there, and I would not let him do what he wanted to do. And so he was different. So he talked to me, and he talked to me of his hopes and dreams for the future. And then he was quiet for quite a while, and then suddenly he said, I want to be a born-again Christian, out of the blue. And I had never heard such strange words before. What? It didn't mean, it's like Chinese, it didn't mean into my intellect, didn't mean anything, but into my heart or in my inner being. I thought, wow, that's it. That's it. And the moment I went, that's it, I turned my head to where the window was in this room, And instead of the window, there was, well, it's like another vision, but I don't like the word vision because it was real. It was real. I saw a hill, and on the hill there were two figures. There was Jesus, and there was, I don't know how I knew it was Jesus because I didn't know anything about Jesus. There was Jesus, and I was beside him. And I stared, and I knew that was me, and I was his bride, and I was beside him. And then suddenly out of my mouth came this massive two-edged sword. As this massive sword came out of my mouth. It was terrifying. And I just stared, and then it was too much. And so suddenly this massive sword coming out of my mouth became a huge cross in my hand. And then that faded. That was that then. And that's lasted. I can see it now. That's lasted. That means everything to me. And then I turned my head away from that window where I'd seen Jesus and me. Crazy. And then I looked at the foot of the bed. And at the foot of the bed, I suddenly saw they would be about that high. Large, very large letters, capital letters, right across the space between the end of the bed and the wall. They were hovering there, and they were, Jesus is the answer. They were capital letters. They were about a meter from the ground, in the space between the wall and the end of the bed, and they were glowing and shining and pulsating, and the letters stayed in the right order. Jesus is the answer. That they were pulsating and moving, and I just stared, and I thought, of course. Well, of course he is. That was just given me, and I was just ecstatic. I just knew that's it. And then the whole, I've forgotten to explain this. The moment that Kevin said, I want to be a born-again Christian, which didn't mean anything to my head, okay, but my spirit, the room became filled with a sense of holiness. And I could use the word holiness because I knew the difference now between my own state of uncleanness and what was pure. And the room became full of purity and holiness and love and incredible love. And here we are, I'm lying almost naked at this man in such a setting, and God came. Yeah. And that holiness was absolutely indescribably wonderful, and what everybody really wants. So it's like, it's just amazing. So that's the
Did he see it? Anything?
I was completely oblivious of him, really. Like, after he said those words, I want to be a born again Christian, and the light went off, and I saw, the vision of the hill, and then the words. Then I don't remember anymore. Yeah, I knew those things are so living in me. I can see them now, yeah. And that boy, I don't think I ever saw him again. Did I see him again? Yeah, later on the mainland, I saw him on the mainland. So anyway, that's that incident that I remember. And then I can go back to when I saw the city of God, and I wrote the note to Kevin and put it with an Easter egg, and then got in the car with the children, and I packed all my bags. I packed everything that I would need to stay at this commune. And so we're in the car driving north from Okupu, Blind Bay, up north along this rough bumpy road to Port Fitzroy. And on my way, I started to get emotional, and I thought to myself, pull yourself together, girl. You're not going to arrive at this place if you're going to drive like this. And then the next minute, there's a hitchhiker, a girl at the side of the road, And I stopped the car, picked her up. She wanted to go to Fitzroy, which was great. It was the way I was going. So I drove her all the way down to Fitzroy, to the shop, and she went into the shop and bought me a bar of chocolate. And I'm very grateful for Sue. She told me her name was Sue, because she kept me being able to drive carefully. And so I said goodbye to her at the shop at Port Fitzroy, and then I drove winding road back up to the top of the hill to the intersection where the road went down to Karaka Bay, which is this Arama Christian Fellowship, and drove all the way down there. And it was very, very beautiful. It was a steep valley, and when you get to the bottom, there's this huge lawn, a few houses, and this beautiful bay and a beautiful beach and 3 Norfolk pines. And I parked the car. Eric was awake, so I took him out of the car. Bianca was on the back shelf of the car, asleep, so I left her asleep. And I got out of the car, held little Eric's hand, and I noticed there's people all around me. And I looked at my watch, and it was 3 o'clock. And all these people were making a beeline for this little bridge across a creek and going to obviously what looked like a main building. It was the biggest building, and it was an A-frame. And I just followed them. They didn't take any notice of me. It was like I was one of them, and I just walked with them, and I joined them. And then they formed a queue inside the building at obviously it was a dining room and a place where they were serving cups of tea and cordial and apples, but you only got half an apple. So I got my cup of tea and a half an apple and a glass of cordial for Eric. We went to the table and sat there. And then I thought, oh, I've done everything I know to do. Now what? What do I do now? And so I just cried. And I'm sitting there crying. And somebody, a lovely person, he was called Darry, he was an American in his 30s. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Can I help you? Like, is there anything I can do for you? I'm the duty, my wife and I," he said, "are the duty couple for this week. And if you'd like to come up to the A-frame, we live in the flat upstairs, and come with me and just come and see my wife and I and come and have a chat." So I didn't say anything. I just got up and followed him. But Eric didn't come with me. I think somebody took him away. It was like they knew what to do. Maybe they'd had distressed people turn up on their doorstep, and they knew I needed a bit of peace and quiet to talk, and so Eric disappeared. Yeah. And so I went upstairs, steep stairs up to the A-frame, and when I went in there, there's beautiful music playing that I'd never heard such beautiful music. Now I know in hindsight it was Christian praise music. It was lovely. And I stared at the end of the room, because that triangle was all window, was all glass. It was lovely. And then his wife came towards me, and I thought, oh, now I've seen an angel. She was beautiful, and she was so graceful how she moved, and I just stared at her. It's like an angel. So anyway, I went in there, and they sat me down on the couch, and they started to talk, and they started to talk a lot of, small talk, what you do. And I couldn't bear it. And while they're talking this sort of small talk, and then they started to tell me about Jesus, but in a way that was like dead, like, and all I needed was to hear the word. As soon as they just said the word Jesus, then that passion for longing for him came to me, and I just stood up. And I said, no, sort of said, no, stop talking, like, no, I want Jesus, I want to find him. If you know, tell me. And they went like that. Oh, okay. They led me into the middle. This is what they knew to do. They took me to the middle of the room, and I was to kneel down, and I was to confess my sins to God, and by the confession of my sins, and that I believed in him. But the thing is that the moment they said his name, I believed instantly. But anyway, I had to kneel there, and I had to speak out all my sins, and you can imagine it was a very long list. And I couldn't believe it, and I thought, but I was given the grace that, okay, and I'll say this sin, this sin, this sin, this sin, and on and on and on, and I suddenly realised I will never come to the end of enumerating or explaining all my sins. There's no end to them. And so that holiness that I forgot to tell you, that while they were talking, and then suddenly they just said the name Jesus, and then that passion came in me, and it's bursting, and I stood up, and I said, yes, but tell me how to find him. If you know, tell me. And then this room was filled with the same beautiful light and love and holiness that I experienced in that bedroom with Kevin. The same holiness and purity. But as I started having to say all these sins, and suddenly realised I've never come to the end of my list of my sins. I'd never. That kind of, the holiness and the love, and it just sort of faded away. But then I knew, I just stood up, and I knew I was changed. I knew I didn't have to go on and on finding sins, because I knew I would never in my whole life come to the end of them. I knew that I was changed, and I was different, and I was so full of joy, and the depression just went, and I stood up, and I knew I just wanted to get out of that place. I wanted to go outside and be with God by myself. So I went down the stairs and out through the hallway and the door, and I got out through the door, and I was standing at the edge of the lawn. I suddenly looked up and I thought, oh, the sky's blue. The grass is green. The trees are green. And it was like scales had been taken off my eyes, but I saw it, and like the colours became more intense. Everything was more alive. Yeah, that was beautiful. More alive. And I was so glad. I was just so glad. And that was the beginning of the rest of my life. The beginning, that was the first day of my life. That was the 3rd of April, 1980. The 3rd of April, 1980. At 3 o'clock, or 3:15. And my life was transformed. Yeah. I mean, lots more. I mean, there's so much more. Like they went and got me a paperback. Apparently this paperback was the New Testament. It was a paperback, and but I thought, this is strange. It's got little pictures in it, and I don't know. It didn't grab me as being the Bible, but they said it was, so I thought, oh, I'll read it. And as I did, bolts of electricity. I don't know how else to describe it, but sudden charges of energy, or bolts of energy, just went shoom, like that, right through me as I was reading it. I don't know what it was that set that off, but obviously what I was reading was touching my spirit that had been born again, that had been freed, had been renewed, had been connection with my Lord. Yeah. And that lasted for days, those bolts of lightning. And then that evening he took me upstairs. They had a bookshop. They had a bookshop above, not the A-frame, a new building at the back. And I couldn't believe it. They took me up there, and it was a bookshelf, and I thought, that is really, really weird. Why do you need all these books? There's only one. There's only one. There's just the Bible. and you know, I was only 1 day old, or less than a day old, and I knew something's wrong here. Something wrong. You just need that one book. Anyway, I chose one that had gold around it, and white. It was a white cover and gold around it, and I bought that. And I went back, and oh yeah, reason why I could stay was because they were full up. They had not a single bed available for anybody to come. And it was true, they had no room. But after, when I came down from the A-frame, and I saw the sky was blue and the grass was green, then he came up to me after that, and he said, look, I'll go to the office, and, you know, because I think you need to stay, or at least stay tonight anyway. And he came back quite quickly and said, look, there's been a cancellation this morning. Quite surprising, these people have cancelled. They were going to have that little caravan over there, and there was, I call it my tin can. It was it was an old 10-foot aluminium caravan. It was right beside the creek at the edge of that huge lawn, and at the end of the lawn was the beach. So that became my home for 10 months. I stayed 10 months there. That was 11. Yeah. Anyway, I went to this little tiny caravan and sat on the edge of the bed, and my brand new Bible, I just opened it up and just opened it anywhere. And where I opened it, for God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. He's chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are strong, and the despised, and He's chosen the despised and the foolish and the dumb and the stupid things to bring to naught. You know, like he's chosen the things that are nothing to bring to naught the things that are. And it just hit me, that scripture, and it's been the foundation of my life. He's hidden these things from the wise and prudent, and he's revealed them to babes. For so it was well pleasing in his sight. Sorry, that's my passion. My passion that he's chosen the dumb and the stupid and the fornicators and the adulteresses and the harlots and the whores. He's chosen the garbage of the world, the scum. And that's my glory. That's my joy. I'm nothing. So he can be everything, and that's the whole secret of my life, my writing, is that he is everything and I am nothing. And all my wisdom, which isn't mine, everything that I know comes out of that. His reality in my heart and his everything in me. Yeah.